Let's return together to the simple. The simple that supports all the complications. And the source, when the spirit perceives itself, at the source is simplicity. And then come the different garments to the simplicity until it can become very complex. It's like a tree that starts from one root, from one reality that receives life from within the earth, and it becomes many, many branches. Branches going between other branches, creating an entire conversation of branches, and yet all coming from one. From one stem, from one source. The one is the simplicity. Everything, all the complexity is on top of the simplicity. This is how we've managed to exist for so long. If we would depend on getting the complexity right, then it would be very difficult for us to survive. And yet we survive, even though the complexity is very wrong, but the simple we can keep right. We can always return to the simple. This simplicity allows us to remember the simple. The simple is what we always know and not always remember. As children, we already knew many things about life that are very relevant now, and we even know them now, but we don't remember that we know them. It's so simple that we never think about it. And because we're always thinking about other things, so we've forgotten that we know the simple. The simple is where we stay connected to the root of life. The details take us further away from the root of life. And this simplicity, if we can learn how to balance our chemicals in this simplicity, then we can find ourselves in every situation. Beneath every complex situation is a simplicity of the one who is experiencing the complexity. Nothing is complex in and of itself. The complexity comes from the one who is observing. And behind that complexity, there's always the simple one who is observing. That simplicity is always there. As complicated as life might be, it's also very simple. Where it's complicated, it can become heavy, it can become difficult to carry. Where it's simple, it's always easy. It's always simple. if we can allow ourselves to stay in this simplicity, then we can heal from whatever went wrong in the complexity. If we're too stuck in the details, if we want specifically a certain way and we can no longer return to our simplicity, then it's much more difficult for us to heal. Coming back to the simple allows us access to a different mode of being. And in that mode, we can return. We can return to our natural simplicity. And when we return, we heal our relationships. Our relationship with reality heals when we return to simplicity. In the complexity, it's very hard for us to stay united with reality. In the complexity, what we expect or desire might differ from what reality has to offer, and over there we find ourselves sometimes opposed to reality. In the simplicity, we unite with reality. We don't oppose because we have the same goal. We want the same thing. We want for the success of this simple being without any specific definitions. And so our desire and the desire of the life force that lives in all unite when we are simple. Our desire and the desire of the life that lives with all might separate if, when we think about the details, we have strong opinions about what should be. And so therefore, that's an area where there might potentially be conflict. In the simple, there's no room for conflict. When there's no conflict, there's more life. There's more desire. Conflict means using life, using energy, in order to destroy life. And so there is a reduction of the overall life force available. When there's no conflict, there's more life available. The experience is of a higher quality. This simplicity can go deeper and deeper. The functions of every organ can be simplified. Every pattern that we use in order to create something, in order to make ourselves feel something, in order to communicate something, could always be improved through simplicity. Complexity comes from protective mechanisms. Protective mechanisms in order to avoid something threatening within the environment. And then the pattern uses more energy than it should have used. And that perpetually remains in place until we simplify. To simplify every process, to simplify perception, to simplify the understanding of other human beings. Simple. Complexity opens up for conflict. This is the way life really is. This is why children can live in this world, adults can live in this world, people who misunderstand reality can coexist. It's because all the madness is happening in the complexity, while the simplicity is making life happen everywhere the same. The simple life is constantly happening, and we're making it complicated in different ways. Different flavors of complication that we create within the details. The life itself remains what it is. It's what it is that makes it special. It's not the complexity that we add to it that makes it special. What we have is already special. Now the work is realizing what we have. We don't need to make it any more special than it already is. We're not lacking anything except realization. With the right realization, all our struggles, all our suffering would be meaningless compared to what we've received. With the wrong realization, every little effort is way too much. The reality is already being given. We're 99.999% there, and yet there's no awareness. There's no appreciation for the magnitude of what's been given. What's been given is very simple. It doesn't look glamorous, it doesn't look at all, it's invisible. It doesn't look in the sense you can't look at it. It looks because it can see. It can hear, it can talk. And yet we don't see it, so we can't glamorize it. And therefore, we don't properly appreciate it. The it that made everything else be. That's how important it is. It's the reason for everything we've seen, everything we've experienced. It's not only the reason, it's the location where the experience took place. It's the experiencer and the experiencee. It's creating for itself an experience, and yet it doesn't know that it exists. Because it's so simple. It's so simple that it's practically invisible. And yet, there's nothing else to see other than it. You've never seen anything else other than it. You cannot see anything else other than it. Everything you think you've seen, you've actually seen it. it looks like everything. It looks like whatever it chooses to look like. It looks like any thought. It looks like any feeling. It feels like you. But who are you? The simple needs to have its space in order to be appreciated. The details, the complexity has taken over our minds. And the simple has been active but not seen. The simple has been experiencing the complexity until it forgot itself within the complexity, and there was no simple any longer, or at least so it appeared in perception. The unity is in the simplicity. The unity is childlike. It's simple, it's naive. It's not interacting with us in a way that is trying to fool us. And yet, because we are so clever, because we are so protecting of ourselves not to get fooled, the simplicity fools us. We can no longer see simple because we've interacted with so much complex. We can no longer be completely vulnerable because we've needed so much protection. And yet the simple is very vulnerable. The simple has no protections. It just is, like a flower. Anybody can come and pluck it. The simple shouldn't need protection. The simple only needs protection because everyone got lost in the complexity. And so the simple will only become fully accessible when there is no longer conflict. As long as there is conflict, we need some complexity to protect ourselves. And yet, if we want to gain access to our true power, if we want to be ourselves, we have to also remember the simple. We have to hold on to the unity while we interact with the world that has forgotten its own origins, that has forgotten its own purpose. So the simple brings us back to a world that is healthier. Completely simple would be completely healthy. The more simple, the more healthy. When the one is with himself, he's completely simple. And the more there's the possibility of being offended, being violated, the more the complexity in order to protect. Every protection is taking away from the energy that was designated for life. Every protection in the life force is being used for an alternative purpose, and therefore there is less available for the original purpose. So the simple refills us with life, realigns us with our true desire. Our true desire is to have this experience fully. In the complexity, we might reconsider this basic desire, and any form of reconsideration is not accurate to the true nature of our desire. This base desire is always present. It's what drove our original creation and continues carrying us throughout this journey and beyond. And so this desire is a simple desire. It's based on the essence of existence, on the nature of the life force that we are. The desires that we choose individually to want specific circumstances or possessions, those come from the complexity. Those are not natural to us. Those are artificial. Those are a result of us seeing someone else maybe enjoying those circumstances or possessions, or our imagination painting to us what it might be like. But it's not a natural desire. A natural desire is what's inherent in our existence. And those are the ones that need to be respected fully. The others should be shaped so that they don't create conflict, so that they don't create attachment to things we cannot have, or attachment to things that are not good for us. So in the simplicity, we're back to our basic needs. That's the simple existence. On top of that, we've created a lot of complex conditions of what we think we should also want. And those reside in the complexity, those reside away from simplicity. Returning to the simple is returning to a unification, where we don't add a burden to what already is. And therefore, we don't try to define the conditions by which reality must behave. We allow the simplicity to arrive to each situation and react according to its own principles, according to the attributes that are inherent within the simplicity, that are following us wherever we go. And this allows life to remain protected from our expectations, our interpretations, our thought forms that try to force reality to become what we think it should be. The more we save ourselves from those thoughts, the more we can appreciate what is. And what is all we need. What is beyond what we can even imagine we need. It addresses needs that we don't even know we have. And yet, they've been provided for because reality knows that we have those needs. In the simple, we regain our ownership over everything. In the complex, we had all kinds of conditions and limitations and translations of what's happening until there's a fragmented reality, until reality doesn't come together to mean anything. And yet in the simple, life is simple. It just is. And therefore, you are everything that you are. There's no calculation that's going to decide what's happening. Reality is taking place directly, in a very simple way. What's happening is happening, what's not happening is not happening. And that's all that's happening. There's no additional commentary, there's no what might be, what could be, what should be, what was. It's just simple. It is what it is. And in that simplicity, we have all our power. All our power comes from that simple place. Over there, there's nobody that can take us down, because nothing can be said. You're the only one. You're the only one that matters. You're the only one that is. And nothing can be said, because it's simple. If we're going to start saying and arguing and interpreting, it's not simple any longer. Simple. The one who's there is there. That means the one who's there is everything. That's simple. It's very straightforward. There's nothing else. There's no one else. There's nothing to consider. There's nowhere to go. It's simple. And in that simple lives everything, lives all the power in the world. It's not the complexity that adds any power. The complexity is using the power up. The power that comes from the simple. So this simple, this is your dwelling place. You're one of the powers that dwells in the simple. Find yourself there.